It's Michael Popok, Legal AF. January 6th is a red letter day in history for the American people, but February 6th may go down as the beginning of the end of Donald Trump, both in his business empire crumbling, his inability to properly fund his presidential campaign, and ultimately the rulings that are just come down against his application of immunity, finding that he does not have immunity and can't dismiss his D.C. election interference trial that will now likely go to trial in the early part of the summer and conclude in time for people to know whether they're voting for a convicted felon or not. Let me break down the perfect storm of events that happened on February 6th to Donald Trump, and what we can expect even later this week. This week alone could prove the beginning of the end of Donald Trump. Let me explain it to you here. First, we started the morning of February 6th with a decision. Took about a month, 57 pages to do it, but three-judge panel, Pan, Henderson, and Childs, have in a devastating setback to Donald Trump, where they dismantled every one of his arguments, every one of his constitutional half-baked theories completely destroyed by the three-judge panel in ruling that he, nor anybody else that'll be occupying the Oval Office, will have presidential immunity, absolute, from criminal prosecution to get an indictment dismissed for conduct unbecoming, as we like to say, while he was president. About an hour or two later, we'll talk about the implications of that, all the way up to the United States Supreme Court as the case gets returned to Judge Chutkan, likely at the end of March or beginning of April, to reset the trial for June or July. We'll talk about that in a moment. I'll talk about that in a moment. Same day, hour or two later, Judge Engoron, who reads the papers, he was presiding over the New York civil fraud case, got up a couple days ago to a headline that read, Alan Weisselberg, disgraced chief financial officer for Donald Trump, who already went to jail for 100 days on 17 counts of tax evasion, is in talks with the Manhattan district attorney that he committed perjury, a crime, while he was testifying in the New York Attorney General civil fraud case in front of Judge Engoron. No jury, he's the trier of fact. And so the judge wrote an email, same day that Donald Trump got the no immunity ruling. He wrote an email that said to the lawyers, high importance, under the Ray line. You know it's high importance when a judge is writing you. He wants both sides to inform him about what is the status of Alan Weisselberg's plea deal discussions and whether he committed perjury. That puts the lawyers for Donald Trump on the horns of a dilemma, because if they admit that he perjured himself and is about to take a plea deal and get convicted of perjury, then if they don't, as officers of the court, which the judge reminded them that they are, if they don't tell him, Judge Engoron, that their client witness committed perjury, then they have suborned perjury, which is also a crime and a way to lose your bar license. So that's the first thing the judge wants to know. Did the lawyers for Donald Trump suborn perjury and allow perjurious testimony to be happening in my courtroom in front of me without telling me? Why haven't the lawyers for Donald Trump come back and told me that their witness committed perjury? That's a second question he has, as reported in the New York Times. Is he really in, the judge wants to know, in plea discussions? And then I want to hear from both sides, but really from the New York Attorney General, about what I should do about this new fact in rendering my judgment about whether I take $500 million away from Donald Trump's empire in a disgorgement judgment and put him out of business for the rest of his life. I'd like to know what I should make of the fact that one of his key witnesses, his former CFO, who either had amnesia on the stand, I can't recall whether Donald Trump ever instructed me to change the numbers, or gave self-serving statements to support Donald Trump, whether that should be completely rejected and found as a negative inference to have been falsely given. There's a concept in the law that says if you commit fraud or perjury on one thing, then all of your statements are considered to be fraudulent and or perjurious. And the judge wants to know, shouldn't I just completely discount and find that everything that Alan Weisselberg said in court was completely unreliable and a lie? Shouldn't I do that? And let me know that in the next day or so. Now, let me tell you how these two twin tsunamis come into effect. Sure, there's all sorts of tambourine shaking going on in Congress because as soon as Donald Trump needs to have to try to step on the news cycle when he had a bad day, and yesterday, the February 6th was a bad day, then he hits the button and Matt Gaetz pops up, Marjorie Taylor Greene pops up, Elise Stefanik pops up. You know the usual suspects. Stephen Chung, the spokesperson for Donald Trump, pops up and says, "Oh, nothing to see here. Congress is going to pass a resolution. MAGA Congress can pass a resolution that I'm not an insurrectionist." Okay, has nothing to do with your terrible bad February 6th ruling day. And then I'll tell you about what's going to happen on February 8th. It's going to be another nail in the coffin. It's a big coffin, but there's going to be another nail in the coffin for Donald Trump. Let me talk about the impact, though. I did this on another hot take, but let me do it in brief here. Of the Engoron ruling. Engoron is going to find that Alan Weisselberg committed perjury. He's going to get the lawyers to have to either concede it or he's going to make the ruling himself. He's going to hold an evidentiary hearing probably on the issue, and then he's going to delay his judgment, which we thought was going to come mid-February next week, until he concludes this entire process. Then by the end of February or so, he's going to issue his ruling, and that's going to be over $500 million against Donald Trump. That last report, Donald Trump has about $400 million in cash. He's already robbing the piggy banks of his political action committees and super PACs to get back money that he originally lent them for the campaign to use to pay his legal fees. He's paying millions and millions of dollars a month in a burn rate of legal fees for all of the cases, the 4 criminal cases, the civil cases, the federal cases, the state cases, the appeals, the multiple appeals, all rejected, all cost money. By my guess, it's $8 to $10 million a month just for Donald Trump's legal fees right now, with no end in sight. Combined with all the millions of dollars he's paying for the kids, Ivanka got millions for her legal fees, Don Jr., Eric, Alan Weisselberg got paid his legal fees for a long time. People in the Jan 6 committee that were witnesses against Donald Trump. Walt Nauta, his co-conspirator. Carlos de Oliveira, his co-conspirator in Mar-a-Lago. They're all getting their fees paid. Some of the people in the Georgia election interference case that are co-conspirators with Donald Trump are getting their fees paid for by Donald Trump. Rudy Giuliani's trying to get his attorney's fees paid for. He's listed Donald Trump as a potential creditor on his bankruptcy filings. Just total craziness. So every dollar Donald Trump has to spend on legal fees, judgments, payoff, the $83.5 million to E. Jean Carroll, the $500 million that's coming down the pike from the New York Attorney General, he's got to get it from somewhere. It's either from the suckers bet of people that follow him. There's only so much you can get out of your suckers. I mean your followers. I mean your voters. and that every dollar is one less dollar that he has for his presidential campaign. He's already behind Joe Biden in presidential campaign fundraising. He's already still fighting with, that's why there's so much pressure on Nikki Haley, even at the Republican National Committee level, which is now controlled completely by Donald Trump, to pressure Nikki Haley to drop out, because every dollar he spends against Nikki Haley is one less dollar he has against Joe Biden. So this is all crashing in. Putting aside for a minute that if the judge in New York puts him out of business completely, where he can't transact business in real estate and lending and borrowing or anything in New York, he's going to have to pick up stakes, reincorporate like in Florida, and start all over again. Good luck getting banks, capital markets, and others to lend you money during that period. So I wanted to kind of bring to a head what February 6th means as we head to February 8th. What's February 8th, Popok? It's the oral argument that the United States Supreme Court is going to hold about whether judges and federal judges under 14th Amendment Section 3 can declare Donald Trump to have engaged in insurrection or rebellion to take him off the ballot and allow Secretary of States around the country in various states to take him off the ballot. Because do we really want a country where an insurrectionist and somebody that engaged in rebellion against the peaceful transfer of power is allowed to stand for office? Or as I said in another hot take, I get it. Insurrectionists and people who commit rebellion may be really popular in one of the parties, but that doesn't mean he should be president. We'll continue to follow what happens on February 8th with the oral argument. Who leads that oral argument? What are the MAGA right wing on the Supreme Court, like Clarence Thomas, who's so conflicted, I can't even believe he can find his way to the bench. given his wife's role and involvement in the insurrection and in stopping the peaceful transfer of power. But he'll be up there. He hasn't recused himself. At least not yet. I mean, he could still on the 8th of February, but I expect a full complement of 9 up there. And the far, far right, they don't sit this way. They sit by seniority. But if they were to sit by where they sit on the political spectrum, it would be far, far right, Alito and Thomas. And then we'd get to probably Gorsuch, and then Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett. Roberts sort of kind of in the middle center right as we move over to the other side of the aisle, which would be Sotomayor, Kagan, and Ketanji Brown Jackson. That's how, if they sat by political leanings, that's how they'd sit up there. We'll have to see what happens, who takes the lead during the oral argument. We'll follow it. We'll get the oral argument at least recorded and be able to respond to it on the MeidasTouch Network and on Legal AF. One place for your news at the intersection of law, politics, and justice. Legal AF, the podcast, that name means exactly what you think it means. Lawyers talking about things they know what they're talking about at that intersection. Wednesdays and Saturdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on YouTube, and then on audio podcast platforms of your choice. Leave me a thumbs up if you like what I'm doing here. Helps with the ratings, the algorithms, helps keep us on the air. Until my next hot take, until my next Legal AF, this is Michael Popok reporting.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Meidas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.